Okay, great. So welcome everybody. This week's recording is about growth mindset, and we're going to start out with a little PowerPoint presentation. And then Christine Liddig is going to be joining us at 6:30 for a discussion. And I think today we've hit midsummer. I know a couple people could not make it to the live session, and so it might be a very small discussion, which is totally great. So I'm going to share my screen and start with this PowerPoint presentation. Hold on one second. Let me get to the beginning of it. Okay. So as I said, today's week was about growth mindset. And growth mindset is kind of an interesting topic because there was a time in science where we did not believe that we could be learning things past a certain stage, that our brains were fixed and they were not growing. And there's that statement, can't teach an old dog new tricks. And what we've actually discovered is that that's not true at all, that our brain is constantly learning and we can continue to actually learn continuously. Often it has to do with what our expectations are and what we personally believe. And so there's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And we talked about that can't say I talked about that, but I shared materials of that in the last week's readings and presentations. And so basically boiled down, the fixed mindset is that you can't learn new things. But if you have a belief that you can learn something new, then what they've discovered is that your brain will actually learn things new. Often fixed mindsets come from messages that we've received from other people telling us our limitations. So, I think about, and Mallory, I don't know if you want to share Afiavi, the fixed mindsets, like any of the limitations that people told you at some point in your life. I can share one that has plagued me and stuck with me to this day. My English teacher, my junior year of high school, told me that I was a horrible writer. And absolutely, she just told me I was a horrible writer, that I wrote like soap operas and all I ever do is watch soap operas. And I was writing about Medusa, which is Greek mythology, which is a soap opera, basically. But that has stuck with me to this day. And I struggle, even though I have 2 master's degrees and I'm clearly a decent writer. Every time I go to sit down, I have a big writer's block because of that. So I've really kind of have to fight this fixed mindset all the time. And I've just said, like, that's it. I can't learn in that way, and I'm never going to be a good writer. So Mallory, I don't know if you have any fixed messages anyone's ever told you.
No, actually, I've been pretty lucky to have a lot of supportive people in my life. Usually it's me telling myself I can't do it. So
yeah, so you create your own messages. You know what I call those? I call those passengers on your bus. And they're all like the internal messages that you tell yourself. Yeah. Is there one in particular or a couple that kind of get in your way at work or in, kind of in the realm of what this is talking about?
Not anything like huge. Just like a lot of little self-doubt, self-talk, but nothing major that I think gets in the way of like me performing at work.
Yeah. So it is kind of interesting that these little messages, or wherever you receive them along the way, or our self-doubts, they kind of get in this way of a fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And so you've read all about what this is and where it comes from. So what I was going to talk a little bit about today is why we can learn. And it's that the brain is always learning, and it has to do with neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to continue changing. And it's kind of fascinating because the brain can change, and it can choose to change for the good or for the bad, because the brain is actually neutral. It doesn't really care which way it learns. And there's two different ways that the brain can learn. It can be a structural neuroplasticity, which means that it changes because of experiences such as learning, which is what we're talking about now with growth mindset, or functional neuroplasticity. And that's when the brain functions move from a damaged area of the brain to an undamaged area of the brain. And so this can happen if there are car accidents or head injuries where the brain has been hit, and then people start to rehab. And sometimes what they'll see in scans is that a different part of the brain is firing. So there's this statement of whatever fires together, wires together. And that's really about when you start thinking about reactions that you have to things or ways of learning things, your brain starts to create synapses that fire together, and then they create memories and experiences of learning. So as I said earlier, the brain is neutral. So it doesn't know the difference between good or bad. And our brain does have neuroplasticity at different ages or because of different things that are happening in our environment. Our brain is always learning from every single experience that you have. And it does have limitations, yet in those limitations, because there are so many parts of our brain that can be retrained, we still can learn and we still can grow our brain, not necessarily kind of the actual mass. So one thing that is really healthy for our brains, and this is what we're learning about creativity, is it's often really important for us to boost our neuroplasticity so that we can maintain our growth mindset and can learn new things. And so to boost our neuroplasticity, a lot of these things have to do with dancing or traveling, creative endeavors. You may think, oh my God, I can't play guitar. Never have been musical. Well, that's part of what a growth mindset is the belief that, well, I might not become Eric Clapton, but I might be able to play a few chords, and that is playing guitar. Or I really have always wanted to be a dancer, or I've always wanted to learn how, my latest is I want to learn how to shoot a bow and arrow for some reason. And so I might learn how to do that in the fall. And mostly it's to learn a new skill. So whenever we learn a new skill or learn how to do something different, it rejuvenates our brain. Now, before, what I was talking about as far as our brains, that what we learn, like the brain is neutral, and it could be something where it learns good things or negative things. What that really is talking about is good feelings, good thoughts about ourselves, or negative thoughts or negative feelings about ourselves. And often, if we have a specific reaction when something happens, if we keep repeating that same reaction or that same behavior, we will continue along that line. And that's the idea of whatever fires together, wires together. So if you are used to doing something, like I know for me, I'm what I've always called a lazy perfectionist. If I try something and I can't necessarily get it right away, I get really frustrated and I think, oh, that's it. I just am never going to be able to do it. Or fearful. And I think, oh my God, I can't do it. So whenever I start to think about something, then I get the fear, and then I can't continue on, and then I get frustrated. and then I'm not going to learn something new. So there's a book called The Big Leap, which is written by Gay Hendricks, who is a Stanford psychologist. And he has this statement in there, which is, if I cling to the notion that something is not possible, I'm arguing in favor of limitation. And if I argue for my limitations, then I get to keep them. And the reason that I have this picture up here of me, this is me getting ready to climb Mount Rainier. And I wasn't even going all the way to the top. It was just going to the base camp. And I was terrified. And I had this fear because my husband kept telling me that clouds could roll in and you could fall over on a glacier. And so he brought these flags that we'd have to place behind us. And even though when I got there, it was a crystal clear blue day, and there are so many people walking up there as like a trail of ants, I kept having this fear, and also the idea of the limitation that I couldn't do it, that I wasn't physically capable or a good enough skier, even though I am physically capable and a good enough skier. But so I put this up here because to me, this was the perfect example of where my fixed mindset was kind of instilling fear in me. And it was also telling me that I couldn't do it, even though I'm visually looking at, I should have taken a picture of all the line of people who are just walking up as if it's no big deal. I definitely did get to a couple places where it was challenging and I was a little terrified, rightly so. And one day I hope to do it again with the idea of this, that I don't have the limitations, that I can do it. But this book is a very interesting book, and Gay Hendricks has a lot of interesting components. One is there are 3 premises to this book, and I think that they have a lot to do with growth mindset. One is that the first one is we don't believe we deserve to be happy all the time. So we cap our joy for no reason. And there are theories and researchers out there who have done research that show that there really is no limit to your happiness, but for some reason we settle back down into a certain level of happiness, and you do have the ability to increase that. The second one is that fear and self-sabotage are 2 common ceilings that we can break through if we have the right attitudes and exercises. And I think that this is the one in particular that struck me about when I was going up Mount Rainier. And then the last one, which is very interesting, I hadn't seen this before. When it comes to work, we can be in 4 zones, but only one is worth shooting for. And I'm going to go through what those 4 zones are. Overall, I think the biggest message, especially when we think about areas that we want to grow, and what Carol Dweck is saying, is that we often believe that we can't grow. And if you just keep trying and keep practicing, you can do something. So Fritz Perls was a German psychotherapist, and I love this statement. He says, fear is excitement without breath. Because often when we get frightened, we hold our breath, and it's that shortness of breath that actually increases anxiety. And so if you can feel that moment of fear and then start to do some deep breathing and relaxing breathing, and we call this 4x4 breathing, where you breathe in to a count of 4 and then exhale to a count of 4, that actually lowers your nervous system. And you can begin to see fear as something more like anticipation or excitement. And I definitely believe that using words to change our perspective is really important. I used to always say, oh, I'm anxious about this, or anxious about something. And I stopped doing that. And now I actually will say, I'm really eager. I'm really eager to go do that. I'm really eager about taking blah, 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 whatever it is. And I have found that actually changes my belief, instead of keeping it in the concept of anxiety. So the 4 zones of work that Gay Hendricks talks about, And these are the 4 zones that most people put themselves in at different times. The first one is the zone of incompetence. So like you suck at the task. Many people can do it better than you. Or the zone of competence, and you think like, well, you're all right, but lots of others cope better or do better. The zone of excellence, you're highly skilled and few can hold a candle to you. Or the zone of genius, you're literally the best in the world at it. Now, not many of us are in the zone of genius. Probably most of us float between the 1 and the 3 zone. And though what he is saying is that we do have the ability to get to the zone of genius, and more of us could if we just didn't think we had limitations. And partly it has to do with the fact that your genius might be slightly different than somebody else's and might look a little bit different. So part of what I was going to have us do is to break out into breakout rooms, that we kind of are in a little breakout room right now, and talk about, I was going to have us break in, actually, Mallory, I was going to have us break out into breakout rooms around these 4 zones of work and talk about where do we feel we each are in these zones, and are there certain areas that you would prefer to, to be in. And I realized that, since it's just such a small group, Mallory, what we could do is I could stop the recording and we could have this discussion and then start the recording when Christine comes on, or we could keep going. It's up to you. I want to respect,
It's not just me. I mean, I would like if Afiavi would participate too.
I
mean,
agree. Afiavi, are you there?
maybe not.
Yeah. I think before I noticed that she was kind of on another call as well. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I'm fine either way, Rachel. It doesn't matter to me. I don't think we're gonna get like super deep and personal on this. So
Okay. I just want to be respectful. So sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be kind of fun to talk about this. Especially in part of, in the framework of this class of growing as a leader and growing into the areas of personal development. Yeah, we could talk about it, just each one, or talk about it as to, in thinking about this, where we're striving to go.
Okay.
What would you?
Well, it doesn't matter to me. I'll just go with the flow.
All right. Well, it's interesting because there are certain things, like say we're born with, right? That we're born with, that we just feel kind of naturals at.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, those things, I don't know, sometimes they rise to the zone of genius or zone of excellence. And then other times we start to take them for granted a little bit, or they go back down to, you kind of suck at it. And I can think of one. As a little kid, I was a really amazing musician, and kind of capped out at some point and got really into stage fright by the time I was 15. And so as a little kid, like 5 years old to 8 years old, I was labeled in the zone of genius.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was in piano competitions and things like that. And then by college, I was in the zone of excellence. And then in my 20s, I was in the zone of competence. And now I'm pretty much in the zone of incompetence.
Oh, shoot.
So that's just kind of interesting, and it doesn't really bother me. It's just kind of a funny thing, like if you think about like what are those natural talents, because you hear about people all the time, right? They're born with these natural talents. And then if I were to go backwards, I would have to say like the zone of incompetence was, I actually was not necessarily a great student, or really good at academic type things. And I have now kind of risen up through out of grit and goals and a desire to see myself in a certain way and to have my interests, right? Like I was just really started to become really fascinated with certain topics, or certain processes more. Like I love facilitation and I love facilitating discussions because I deeply, deeply enjoy people feeling seen and heard. And my goal is to get in the zone of genius of that, but I'd probably say I'm between 2 and 3, you know. But yeah, I'm curious what you think of yourself, or that's kind of how I was thinking of this when I saw this. And is there anything that you were thinking of with you?
I don't know. I guess I really hadn't, thought of it, but I'm kind of the opposite of you. I think I was a really good student when I was little. Like school was super easy. I was
Mhm.
that kid that, was bored in class and, I mean, didn't really even have to try hard. And now, oh boy, I feel like I'm in the zone of incompetence trying to get my master's right now. Just trying to relearn study skills and
Yeah.
retention and test taking. And it's, at my age, it's been interesting.
Yeah. Going back later is harder. I know that I went back later too, and it was much different than when I went right from college. It is. Your brain that's that part though, that's that neuroplasticity. You are really, stretching that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've always prided myself on wanting to learn new things and try new things and do new things, but whew.
Yeah.
School is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I get that. It is. I get that. And there's just so much in the learning component and so much in even, right, like having to do it the way that they structure it. That's for sure.
I'm grateful that I can do it, through distance learning, but
Hmm.
I'm old school. Like I like a textbook. I like to be able to ask the professor questions. And
Yeah.
I've had 2 classes where I've been able to buy a textbook and the rest of them have all been ebooks.
Mm.
So honestly, that's probably been one of the biggest challenges for me is the technology component.
Oh,
So
yeah. I would have to print out for sure. I would definitely have to print it out. Welcome, Christine. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Hi, Rachel.
Hi. I'm going to stop the share right now, Mallory, and we'll just kind of jump in and talk with Christine. We have a small class today, and so I think we'll just have kind of a pretty casual and maybe shorter discussion that we normally have in the past.
Okay.
So Christine, this is Mallory, and Mallory lives in Butte. And Mallory, do you
Ooh.
want to share a little bit about yourself? And
sure I can. Hi Christine, thanks for being here.
Hi. Yeah.
I'm actually in the master's program. I'm working on my MBA. And I was just telling Christine that I decided to go back to school on a whim late in life, and business isn't even my first degree, nor was it the job I was in. So I just like to push myself. So here we are. And yeah, like Christine said, or Rachel said, I apologize. I live in Butte and I work at Tech in the enrollment services department. So that's my life in a nutshell.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Thanks for being
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Afiavi is I guess I would say like an exchange student.
She's
A
here
business.
I know Afi.
Oh, you know
We've
Afiavi, she's
met.
here, but
We've
she's
met.
not. Oh, good. I'm glad you've met. She usually comes on and so she's here, but she doesn't always participate. So
Okay.
she's listening, I think. Afiavi's listening. Yeah.
She's got a lot going on and not much longer in the States, if I understand it correctly, or in Montana specifically. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. Yeah, so I think that sorry about the phone in the background. I already explained to Mallory that I am at my parents' house in New Jersey. so-
Oh, I forgot. That's true. You are. How are you? How's your family? Say hi to all of them from me.
I will. They're
Okay.
all doing really, really good. But so what our discussion today was going to be, or is about growth mindset. And Christine, I invited you to this class, and there's still lots of people that are going to be viewing this.
Okay.
So I'd still like to kind of run through some of our discussion and questions.
Sure.
But I invited you to this because you've had a variety of roles in your career. And not only that, you've really placed challenges in front of you that do require a growth mindset, meaning, a fixed mindset is the belief that we really can't, that we're limited. Like what we have is in ourselves is what we have. We don't really have the ability to learn new things. And the growth mindset is that it might be harder to learn things, but we can learn things. And you place challenges in front of you in order to keep growing and learning. And that is, I think, something that I've witnessed in you as an individual in the workplace and in life as well. So I'm just curious, for you, what has driven that growth mindset?
I had a feeling that's where you're going to head with this, Rachel. It's funny because I think part of what I've historically communicated is I don't know that I ever really knew I had a growth mindset. I don't know that I ever really knew how to operate any differently than to engage in what was in front of me and do my best at it. I do think as I've aged, I've become aware that how I move through the world and the choices I make are very different from everyone around me. And by everyone, I mean, not everyone, right? But there are a sliver of people who are brave enough, like you, Mallory, to redirect yourself, to just say, no, I'm throwing it down, I'm doing it. And I think in part, really, the story I'll tell is that probably 8 years ago, my father took me to an investing dinner. I don't know if anyone's ever received one of those postcards, but DA Davidson or whatever other investing company, SG Long and Company here in Missoula, or somebody will send a card and say, we're hosting a dinner and we'd like you to come and learn how to invest your money. Gray hair shows it's about that time for me to be getting those postcards, right? And so my dad calls me up and he says, I got another one of these postcards and you got a postcard. I saw it on your piano. How about if we go to this together? And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll go. And in the process of being at the dinner and listening about how to invest money or not to invest money or what, that sort of engagement in life looks like, my dad turned to me and he said, honey, I just want to say here and now that I apologize. And I was like, what? And he's like, I apologize for teaching you how to work hard and forgetting to teach you how to work smart. And I said, oh, don't worry, Dad, I'm figuring that out. But I think in the end, that is probably, I would be remiss if I didn't give my dad some credit somehow, that in that he was a hard worker. He felt like, the old grab it by the bootstraps. And so it wasn't until really recently that, again, I looked around the world and realized that I operate differently. I go after things differently. I don't think of them as challenges. Probably not until the last 3 years do I even think of things as barriers. I'm just like, basically my motto has always been, I'm only here once. So I'm going to do what it is I want to do while I'm here because I don't know when I'm not going to be here. And if that's a growth mindset, from a business standpoint, from pushing yourself or however people are currently defining it, then it's a shoe that fits. But for me, it's not how I self-define.
I have to go back to that story that your dad said, though. That is a great story and it's huge. Part of what we were talking about before this had to do with messages that we received when we were younger. And some of those messages can keep us in a fixed mindset or push us towards a growth mindset. So it's interesting because when you say, well, this is just how I'm made, in some ways, there were messages coming at you that you didn't realize that just were like, the world is yours, go for it. Like, and maybe it was that if you work hard enough, because I have witnessed you as an incredibly hard worker. But I enjoy that your father now says like, maybe there is a smart way to do this. You know,
I appreciate it. And I do, you're right, Rachel. I am an incredibly hard worker, and I don't, there was a period in time where self-defining women who were discovering the workplace, or defining women who were discovering the workplace as workaholics, just like we would over history and still now define men who invest in work. For the longest time, I had this workaholic label over my head, and I would constantly say, but I'm passionate about what I do. This is also my passion. This is also my hobby. This is like, I wake up and my skin is tingling. And why is this any different than my husband, who's a musician? And if he were all of a sudden to be offered to go on the road to tour with his band, he would go and no one would call him a workaholic. And he'd leave me at home with the kids and he'd be gone. But if I went and got childcare for the kids while he's gone on the road, he's not the workaholic. I'm the
Yeah.
So it's just always interesting. And I really do think also growing up in Montana sort of gave me that like gung-ho, I can do this, surrounded by nature and spending a lot of time out in the wilderness and challenging myself to whatever was there gave me sort of that can-do attitude.
Yeah. The other part of growth mindset that I'm curious about is it's about learning new things and giving yourself goals and the opportunity to learn and setting that as a priority. So in your work, and this is kind of, anyway, in your work, have you done that? And what did that look like in your work environment?
Sure. I am not without setting goals, for sure. And I think I've rediscovered over time that I'm very, very, very good at setting short goals, that I get impatient when I set long-term goals, or even more impatient when long-term goals don't have a tactile, tangible outcome. I struggle. But I have to say and give credit to the fact that I'm married to someone who really digs long-term goals and likes the journey of process and getting to the finish. And I think the best goal setting and the best story to share is when we decided to consider selling Bernice's Bakery. So for anyone listening, I owned Bernice's Bakery here in Missoula, Montana for the last 15 years. And I shouldn't say the last, because now it's been 3 years since I sold, but right around year 13, give or take, my husband and I just started talking about, okay, we should really look at starting to stage our business to sell, which is a completely different way of thinking about running a business. And so we set a goal that we were going to sell it in 10 years. And we started working towards that goal. And we sold the bakery in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And I have been mind blown over that transition and maybe even just transformation of what it looked like to put intention down on paper, to have a long-term plan, to be thinking long-term, but sort of like checking off the short-term goals, and then all of a sudden to look up and here is someone who wants to buy our bakery. And it's 3 years. And we weren't, when we sold the bakery, we had a big discussion. We weren't totally ready to sell. And it was like, oh, wow, but we did this. Here is someone who will be an incredible next owner and steward of the bakery. We need to sell. We don't know that if we continue on this path, that another buyer will come along, but also the just right buyer. And the positive end of the story is I really do love the new steward of the bakery. So she's doing great and I love her.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that goal, I mean, it does sound like there's a great balance between the two of you. So in that goal, there was kind of sounds like some lessons that you had to learn and different challenge. I don't like the word challenges, you're right, but just basically different things that came up for you. that presented themselves that.
I think one of the best things about the bakery, and maybe a little backstory so that everyone gets some more of my backstory, but maybe a little bit more of yours too, Rachel, is that I opened Redbird Restaurant in Missoula in 1996. And Rachel worked for me in the 5 years that I had at Bernice's, Redbird. And that's where we met. But, oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought now. Ask me your question again, Rach. I'm sorry.
Oh, it had to do with things that you've learned in the transition of the selling of Bernice's and the challenges that came up. And that's what triggered you to think about Redbird. Because I don't know if it had to do with the selling of Redbird when you got to that.
Yeah, part of it was selling Redbird, but I think the point I was trying to get at and talking about the challenges is that when I had Redbird and when we made the decision to buy Bernice's and that transition came into my life, that's where there was an incredibly huge learning curve for me that I had never experienced before. When I went out to open Redbird, sure, there was a learning curve, but there's like this adrenaline you get when you're opening your own business or starting a new project. It's just like sewing a new blanket. But when I jumped into Bernice's with my husband, the learning curve was really steep. I'm not a baker. I wasn't a baker. I was a chef. And to learn how to run and manage and think about a bakery and what it looks like and what it operates like, and to know that we were stepping into a situation that needed support, guidance, good management, to go from 15 employees, including myself, to 37 employees, including myself, overnight was also a different learning curve. You manage 15 people differently than you manage 35. But all along the way, one of the pieces that did become the most valuable and is one of those sort of motto phrases that we talk about is that I became very aware that being a lifelong learner is a valuable, valuable skill. Being willing to, and Rachel, we're talking about challenges or barriers or taking risks. Blah. Be a lifelong learner. What the heck? It's easy to define. You don't have to apologize for it. And in the end, you get so much more out of the journey if you are signing yourself up for that learning. And I signed myself up not just to learn how to run my bakery, but also to learn how to be a better manager, high quality individual with people and humans. And that's probably to this day still one of my biggest assets, is just my ability to continue to learn about humans and engage with them and interact with them. I learn, they learn. It's a great symbiotic relationship.
Definitely. Mallory or Afiavi, do you have any questions for Christine?
Not yet. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to know who's lifting weights in the back of your space there.
My doodle. We actually have I'm in my basement because we have family over. So we actually have a full gym, but the only one using it right now is my dog is down here with me.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, so funny. So Afiavi, do you have any questions? No? Okay.
Excuse me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Looking for mute.
Now it's good, I think. It's okay. It's okay now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. My question is this, because Christine has already led a company, so she has many experience in how to lead a company and how to make it grow. So I think the one problem we have in my country, many startups after 1 year or 2 years, they break down. Which advice can you give to that women entrepreneurs that can help them to be to hold their company?
So Afi, I'm going to clarify. You said staff helpers. Does that
Yeah.
mean employees? Are you specifically talking about employees in the company breaking down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is ever a situation where you are 100% guaranteed that the people who work with you
Mhm.
will stay with you or not leave.
Mhm.
I want to be clear about that. There are ways
Yeah.
that you can keep them longer.
Mhm.
And I think really when I talk about keeping staff longer or human relationships,
Mm.
know that I paused for a second and said, people work with you. They
Mhm.
don't work for you.
Yeah.
There's a big difference. And I think it's super, the women in your country could potentially see a longer period of retention with their staff if they thought about their staff as individuals who are also in the process of learning about life. And what that really requires is you are, and to be clear, Rachel could probably share some stories because it took me years to develop this skill. I was not out of the gate good at it. And I was at much more risk when I opened Redbird than later in my life. And so when you're at risk and you're really tense as the owner, you can say and do things that alienate your staff, right? But what you want to do is be available to have real meaningful conversations with your staff. And I think the
Okay.
biggest compliment that I've ever gotten was
Mhm.
upon selling Bernice's and still being in town and being around for the last 3 years, this many members of the staff who have left have said, wow, we love the new owner. Wow, she's doing all kinds of things you always said no to. Wow, she's moving the bakery in new and different ways. But Christine, you always made time for me. Always. If I told you I needed 15 minutes, you said, give me 15 and I will be right back. You never put me off. You always addressed my question, whether it was personal, if people were having personal issues, whether it was work related, because really, there's a lot of messaging around this word employees, but really, human beings are your biggest asset of your business. Those individuals are helping you
Yeah.
make money, and leveling that playing field and including respect and care and a dialogue goes a long way. A long way. And I have no idea what the cultural standards to that are in your country, Afi. I don't know. I just know that we all struggle. We all need to have conversations sometimes and to feel valued. And that's the piece that has carried me the furthest.
Okay, thank you. So the second question is that I have asked this question last time, but maybe it's the occasion to discuss about that again. What advice can you give to one of my women entrepreneurs who are managing only a man-like employees? One of my women entrepreneurs who are managing only men's like employees.
Well,
because in my country, because in my country, our culture is that man is in the first place, woman is in the second place. But seeing one woman managing a man is very difficult to understand.
So I hear you, but I think I want to ask you a question back. When a man works for a woman in your country, is he choosing to work for her?
Yeah.
So
yes.
then, so I think this is a hard question to answer, right? Because there's so many cultural dynamics that come into play.
Yeah.
But if the man is choosing to work for her, then there's the potential for a meaningful relationship that challenges the dynamic, but also If he's choosing to work for her, there's something he wants from that relationship. So her discovery is, why is he there? What does he want? Is he only there for money? I know there are people who are driven only by money, but there really is few and far between as those who don't care about money. Like, there are other incentives and reasons that people go to work for particular businesses. He could probably, many of those men could choose to work somewhere else, right? So why are they choosing to work for her? And if she can discover what that is and nurture their passion while they're working for her, then they feel what do I want to say? She's up here, right? But in your country, men are up here, right? So as she nurtures their passion and their own self-respect, it creates this level playing field of just mutual relationship. And while I answer that, I just want to say that is a very white privileged answer I just gave you. I have never lived in South Africa, but I know that when I ran a bar one time, I only had male employees for a long time. And even in the United States, that was challenging. And part of that growth when I ran that bar was me learning more about those individuals and feeding whatever their interests and passions were connected to work, but also outside of work, whatever that looked like. So if one of the guys was really into softball, I made space to go see a softball game. I didn't go see them all. I just showed up at one. There I was. I sat, I watched. It gave us something to talk about. It sort of switched the dynamic. I'm still in control. I'm still the one signing the checks, but it's building a relationship. So it's probably the best answer I have, and I'm not sure it's good enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard here. It's hard here. And I can only imagine in your country that it's is much, if not more challenging in those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah.
Christine, there's just so much incredible wisdom and so much that you've been talking about. And you're talking about some things that, you know, people in this class know that. So this class is called Authentic Leadership. And I am very open and honest about how I struggle with that term. And you hit on really the reason why the word leadership kind of troubles me, and it always has troubled me. And you said it's when you have, you know, like defining the word employee, like you have people that you work with. And that is one thing. The reason I have always had this trouble with leadership is I've never seen hierarchy in my whole entire life. When I worked at the National Audubon Society in New York City, and I was an entry-level administrative assistant, I would go to the president of the Audubon and just talk to him like, hey, Peter, what's up? And people would always be like, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, he's a person, isn't he? You know, but I just love how you really talked about it. And in your relationship as a business owner, there's two other really lovely things that you talked about, which is that it is people's lives, and we're here to grow as people through what we do in our day. And if that part of that day is called work, then how do we grow together? And how do we help each other grow? And then the other part is that it is, again, we're spending all our time with these individuals, or 40 hours or more. So it is about relationships. And how do we help each other develop relationships where we see each other as people? And so in that last component that you talked about of going to the softball game, or, you know, how do you level up kind of when you're a woman with a bunch of men, like how do you level that up so that they do feel heard and respected, and not like they need to use their male power over a female boss, which does happen. it's just that part, like you said, it's about respect and relationships and caring about who they are as people. You went to the softball game. I'm sure that there's other things. It's like that part of you that cares enough to take time to go find out and show up and find out are they interested in, what kind of conversation could we have, rather than just saying, hey, it's really smoky out there, right? Or the bears, or I don't know.
You know, I
Really-
want to say to Afi Avi, and maybe add a caveat or an additional element to what I communicated. It would be unfair of me to not say that I didn't have boundaries. I did have boundaries and places where that weren't necessarily connected to me being a woman in charge. They were just connected to the success of the community that I was trying to build in the workplace and the successful business I was trying to run. So I want to be clear that there were many male, female, doesn't matter, dynamic moments and challenging moments where my nurturing social business side had to come to a complete stop because that boundary pushing was putting my business at risk. And that was always the driving bottom line. It wasn't money for me, but if you're going to put other employees at risk, if you're going to put my business at risk, if you're challenging me in moments that actually really impact business directly, then Christine, the real strict boss, the real male, female, doesn't matter. I'm just in charge and I'm the one who has a lot at risk here trying to make this happen. I had very clear boundaries. And what was amazing is that when you're building relationships, real relationships with people, it is so surprising how they respond to real boundaries when they need to happen. It is it's less painful. Even if it's still painful, it's less painful. It's not as challenging. It's not as severe. It still happens. There's still a meeting place and some discussion that has to happen and some drawing of strict lines and expectations. But it is amazing how a real effort to have and build relationship can help those moments not be so severe. And when you're talking about people walking out, those are the moments where you get to actually lean into that nurturing relationship to get people and encourage them to stay. And to not also be afraid, and perhaps this is something to share for your community of entrepreneurs as well, but is actually really never be afraid to say you're sorry or you were wrong. And there are a lot of times when we feel like we're in charge, or if we want to say the word leader, where we feel like if we say that we were wrong or we made a mistake, that somehow we're less than a leader. But what I've learned over time is that's where the good stuff is. That's where people really look at you and the respect builds. And that in turn also will continue building that retention that I think you were asking about for your entrepreneurs in South Africa.
Thank you.
It's not
Thank
simple.
you, Christine.
It's not simple.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
But it's really fulfilling. I know.
Yeah.
No easy answer.
It's not easy.
No.
Not at all. Well, Christine, I feel like this has been such a wonderful discussion, and Afi, I appreciate so much you asking those questions, because they're very critical questions and important, and I think ones that, people in a position of supervising or in this leadership role really have to contend with often. And that clear line, Christine, that you said of needing to really make it, I would guess that you made it very clear to your employees what the boundaries of the business are, and so that they would know what to expect. Like, this is our goal. We really want to have our business succeed in this way, And so it was easy for you to return to that when you thought, oh, okay, boundaries are being pushed and that's going to affect my business, rather than it coming out of left field, you know?
Well, I think yeah, of course, Rachel. And I guess I shouldn't operate with assumption in this conversation. So if we talk about some of the basics of having their own businesses, Afi, a manual or an employee manual is what we call it in the United States, is really a statement of how you want to operate your business. It's broken down into guidelines that help employees know how to operate in your business. And it's you or the entrepreneur taking the time to figure out what is important to you and where that line will be drawn. And that work is some of the work that I consider and coach. And Afi and I have met before, but in my capacity with the Missoula Small Business Development Center. But in the coaching process and when people are getting ready to open their businesses, I am always talking to entrepreneurs about doing your foundational work while you don't have your business, so that you know all your whys, you've answered all the possible questions, you know where your boundaries are, you know what your guidelines are, you know what you want, you know what you don't want. Because when you start operating your business, it's almost like one of those automatic tennis ball machines where the tennis balls just keep coming at you every day. And if you've done your foundational work, if you've ran your numbers, if you have developed your employee manual, if you have a clear sense of what you want customer service to be like, you know what your inventory is, you know who your suppliers are, then when those tennis balls start coming at you, or when you end up in HR or human moments, you can operate from a very strong center. You don't even question it because you've done all of your homework. I'm a bit of a rule follower. We've already established that I'm a hard worker. So I learned through the old school business plan of 40 pages, which is not so popular anymore, but I still promote it. Like, learn and get as much as you can solid in your center, so that in those moments when you're busy in your business, it doesn't feel like you're being smacked in the head with a tennis ball every 5 minutes. You're ready and it feels really good and you can feel really strong.
Thank you.
And it takes practice, right? I've been doing this for a long time, 30 some plus years. So one focus, different businesses, but really one focus and similar intention.
Perfect. Well, Christine, we really appreciate you coming to our class today, and it's been a really deep and wonderful discussion. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah. And so we still have about a half hour left. And so I'm just going to review a couple things. You're more than welcome to stay if you'd like, or I'm sure that you have lots more going on in your evening.
I so appreciate the invite, and it was great to meet you, Mallory and Afi. So good to see you. Mallory, did you have any questions before I popped off? I know that Rachel wants to shift gears, but I know you weren't ready before and don't want to leave you high and dry if you did.
I appreciate that. No, actually, I'm good. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm just trying to develop my leadership skills.
Well, good for you. Go for it.
Thank
Okay.
you, Christina.
Yeah, you bet. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you as well.
And Rachel, thanks again for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Okay.
You bet. Good night.
Night.
Right.
Well, that was absolutely wonderful. Christine always has very thoughtful, very precise kind of information to share. So Afi, I hope that that was helpful for you. I did think about your question, and I went back to Rena and asked her, and her response was, it's actually not that much different in the United States for women to lead a bunch of male employees, but that was all that she told me. So she didn't really give me much more than that. So I hope that Christine's answer was helpful for you.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, very helpful. Yeah,
But
thank you.
good, good, good. I'm glad. Um, the last thing that I had in the presentation that I had before was really just to have you talk about and think about where do you need and want to grow. And it was things that I took from that I had up on the Moodle page. So I was just going to give an opportunity for there to be discussion about those concepts and see if there was any group discussion or brainstorming that you both would want to have around that. And then the other thing was to, I again was going to show the leadership map and review any like the assignment and see if there were any questions that you had about that. So this was the last, these were the kind of that component that I put up on the Moodle of, you know, where do you need or want to grow as a leader? Do you know what your growth plan is? What would help you do that if it's workshops or if it's picking up a different activity? Part of the growth mindset is actually choosing something that you know you're not good at and learning how to do it so that you could see what it's like to learn something from scratch and stretch yourself. So did either of you want to talk about any of these? Was this pretty clear, or you're still working on it?
Honestly, Rachel, I haven't even looked at it yet. Sorry,
Okay,
I read
that's
through
fine
most of it.
too.
I read through, I don't know why I'm a rule follower. So I start with the lessons in like the order they are, and then I look at the questionnaire at the end when I'm done.
Okay, that is totally fine. I think that's great. That is totally fine. So then we'll leave this. We'll leave this for certain. Do you want to look at then in the last, and we can also end early because I know that it's been a long day for everybody. There's no need to stay on just for the time's sake. But I wanted to make sure that you understood the final authentic leadership map. That for some reason was hidden, but we definitely got that where people can see it now. I didn't know if you had any questions about that.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. How about you, Afiavi? Did you have any questions about it? Okay,
Not yet.
okay, good. That was really all I had for today. When there's more people, usually there's more discussion, so the time stretches out more. But it's lovely. Yeah, right? But it's lovely to see you both, and I appreciate your showing up. And we only have, so we have one session next week, and that'll be our final class.
Wow. It's hard to believe.
I know, right?
Okay. Wow. Oh, next week.
Next week is
Okay,
the
yeah, I
last
see.
one.
Next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the time has just flown by.
Yes, it really has.
Yeah. Well, I you know, like you can always reach out to me through email if you have anything you want to talk about or while you're moving through the rest of the material. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you both next week.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay. Okay. Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye, Afiavi.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.